what are the biggest things bothering you right now?
Our politicians are buying votes. Government's injecting huge amounts of money into the economy, and they did that on the back of COVID.
Yeah.
It causes inflation. Who determines what hate speech is? It is something that is so dangerous because governments can use this to suppress ordinary opposition.
Do you think there's a political will to fix the financial soup we are in?
The Federal Treasurer said we're going to have a deficit of $37.5 billion. This is outrageous. Nothing in the world is free. At the end of the day, somebody has to pay.
What a citizen should do during non-election years?
I'm fighting for the future of your children and your grandchildren because you can see what's happening today, how they can't afford to buy a house and everything's getting harder and harder. Well, it's just going to get worse.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, Tony. How are you?
Good, thanks, Dale. Good.
Our last conversation was probably early this year.
Yeah, it would have been early, yes.
Early this year.
Yes.
And things have evolved since then. We had two elections, state and a federal election.
Yes.
The evolution of the country is going somewhere. And what are the biggest things bothering you right now?
Look, mostly our politicians are buying votes. They are just buying votes by promising things the nation can't afford and the population ought not to be demanding. It's as simple as that. And we have a situation where yesterday the Federal Treasurer said we're going to have a deficit of $37.5 billion. This is outrageous. Our country should be like Singapore or Norway. We should be living within our means. Now, when governments spend money they haven't got, when they borrow money that they don't have and inject it into our economy, this causes inflation. This is not an opinion, this is a simple fact. That government's injecting huge amounts of money into the economy, and they did that on the back of COVID.
Yeah.
It causes inflation. And inflation is then controlled by the Reserve Bank by sticking up interest rates, pushing interest rates up. So the average citizen who thinks he's a beneficiary of government largesse is now saddled with higher interest rates as the Reserve Bank tries to control an inflation that's caused by government. Now, this is not...
And increasing costs. Because as the inflation goes up,
straight
things
away,
goes costly.
everything starts costing. And so what's happened to the ordinary person in the street who wants to buy a house? The cost of that house has gone through the roof. Inflation has caused interest rates to go up. And somehow or another, the government is getting away scot-free. You know, ordinary people in the street should be demanding the actual resignation of the Prime Minister and actually turfing this government out because they've created most of the problems that they're now standing up saying, we're here to solve them for you. So I'm disappointed that the ordinary voter in the street fell for this. And so we had a landslide victory, state and federal, on the back of very bad policy that it just indicates a lack of any understanding of how an economy works and what the implications can be. So my greatest concern right now is inflation and what it's doing to our economy.
Do you think there's a political will to fix the financial soup we are in, or the financial or the economy is being that bad? Is there a political will to solve that problem? No,
there's not. Unfortunately, the average Australian voter is so insulated from the real world, and I've said it before, if an Aussie voter's got a pie in one hand, a can of beer in the other, and he's off to the football, he's pretty happy with things. And when you see the subsidisation of local government and transport in WA by the government, people like free stuff. They just love free stuff. And when governments give them free stuff, like subsidised transport on trains and buses, of course people like that. But nothing in the world is free. At the end of the day, somebody has to pay. And we are diverting too much of our money away from the things we should spend on that are productive into the unproductive side. And the average person in the street doesn't seem to want to know.
And recently there was this incident at Bondi of shooting off, and we lost 16 lives. It seems like the government is using this situation for the political play around it.
They're going to use it to take away the rights of ordinary people. I think it's wrong that people have hundreds of firearms. That's not what's required. But the draconian response to what's happened there will address an issue that doesn't really need to be addressed. Rifles didn't walk down the road and start shooting people. Fundamentalists did this. And there was plenty of warning this was coming. But our federal government, through a number of its actions, the recognition of Palestine, the failure to crack down on people that were walking up and down the streets of Sydney, demonstrating outside the Opera House.
Yeah.
They were saying things that should never be said in Australia. They need to be, in my opinion, sent back where they came from. And with what they call now facial recognition, it ought not to be terribly hard to find the people that were yelling out death to the Jews and death to Israel and say, chant that as much as you like, but do it in the country you came from, because this is not Australian. We don't need you here. And this has resulted in these deaths and probably again. As we discussed earlier, the civil rights lawyers will intervene, and this will turn into a multi-million billion dollar operation to try and get them out of our country. We don't need them here. This is not the Australia I grew up in. And we need to take into account the fact that we see Australia as a nation of freedom and free speech. And these people with their hate speech have generated what happened. We need to say to them, go away, and we need to stop bringing them in.
One extreme end of the exceptions of the room, people who are fundamentalists of any kind on the far right, on the far left corner, and these are minority of the population, and then legislation comes into on hate speech and on information gathering to manage the exceptions of the room, but the law is impacted to everybody. So it takes away power from everybody, not just the minority.
It takes away from everybody. And we had these incidents in WA where two shooting events resulted in the deaths of people. Everybody else was punished for what happened. Now, I was heavily involved in the negotiations at a state level as to what was happening at the time. They couldn't prove for 1 minute that punishing law-abiding citizens with a licensed firearm was going to resolve the issue, because they indicated to me there were over 200,000, in their opinion, this is the police, unlicensed firearms out in the society today. They were very keen to punish law-abiding citizens that had a licensed firearm, but they were not prepared to address the issue around the unlicensed firearms. So look, the collateral damage that can occur from this knee-jerk reaction is huge. And you said a moment ago about the curbing of hate speech. Who determines what hate speech is? It is something that is so dangerous, because governments can use this to suppress ordinary opposition to policies that the broader community in Australia do not support. And so you might stand up and say some things that they regard as hate speech, or the police involved in determining hate speech would see you nullified, perhaps even jailed. Whereas people have died all over the world for what we call freedom of speech. I love that saying, that I disagree entirely with what you're saying, but I will defend your right to say it, because that's a freedom.
And I think across all civilization and functioning democracy, the freedom to speech is very critical, because the first thing in a totalitarian regime, the first thing taken off from citizen is the speech. And because once you curb that freedom of speech, and when you buy out the fourth pillar, which is media, you go towards super control, large government. You have to give away all your rights and freedoms to the government.
So Dev, if you consider the religion of Islam, and you can start in Morocco, on the western side of Africa, and come right across the northern part of Africa itself, and then into the Middle East, all those Islamic nations that exist there, you have one shining democracy, one tiny, I think it's 2% of the area of the population that is Israel. It is a democracy. Look, they riot and they protest and they do all sorts of things, but they accept the fact that you should have a freedom to speak. This doesn't exist in any other Islamic nation across the whole of the Middle East. They've lost that freedom to speak. And largely speaking, they're totalitarian states. And if you look at Turkey today, which was actually a functioning democracy, it's not anymore. Erdogan has put so much legislation in place that he's almost cemented his position. So let's look at what democracy is about and what we might inherit as we bring these people to our country. They're not interested in democracy. They've come from nations where that religion has overrun any concept of democracy. And what they are calling for in our country is not the democracy that we grew up with. We need to be very careful about our capacity, perceived capacity, to absorb these people into our culture and our society, because they don't want to be.
And you're talking about radical of any kind.
Of any kind. But One of the things that defines Christianity, Judaism and a number of other religions is we love life. We love being alive. We love life. It's an important part to us. This, as preached by the radicals, is a religion that says paradise awaits you. You can do whatever you like. You can murder, you can kill whatever you like. But paradise awaits you. Celebrate death. Welcome death. We have a massive confrontation here between a society that loves life and another society at its extreme that doesn't love life.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous.
From a point of view of the two-party system in Australia, Liberal Party and the Labour Party, and there are other smaller parties. So what's happening right now, you can see a surging vote share or primary vote share of One Nation. And then there's a gap being filled on the centre-right part of the politics, which has been filled by One Nation in some way or form, and voters are seeing them as an alternative, and that's what the numbers are looking in the most recent polling. What do you see that trend reflective of, and what's your projections on that?
Dev, what we need to consider the primary vote, the parties that people vote for. It's running Labor and Liberal at about 30%, give or take. There's not much defining the difference between these two parties, and so then it comes down to the preferential voting system that we've got, which got the socialist parties into power. But it also explains that the population of Australia is not that convinced that these two parties offer an alternative. You go to Pauline Hanson and what she has said and been saying all along. She said that if we keep going the way we're going, this is what's going to happen. And people have figured out, a lot of people have figured out that she's right. That really it may seem harsh, but she's been right. And if you go back even further to the 60s and 70s, there was a fellow in Great Britain called Enoch Powell. He was vilified and attacked and criticised by the vast majority of people who largely unthinking. He said, if you're not careful, you will change the complete nature of our nation. And it's happened. You now have these enclaves of Islam in London, in Birmingham and other areas, and France as well, where you're starting to see Sharia law as becoming the law of that suburb or that city, and this is wrong. I mean, for heaven's sake, we have a belief system in our country and we have a legal system in our country, and everybody should be subservient to that. And suddenly you have these groups rising up in centralised areas, especially Western Sydney, where they actually dominate electorates. And it was said a little while ago that the reason that the Labor Party has been so soft on these protests in Sydney is because they are Labor-held seats. And these parties themselves might not have the power to elect their representative, but they have a lot of power in determining who will be the representative of that electorate. And so you might find that these little sort of small electorates can provide the 4 or 5 seats that will determine whether a Liberal government governs us or a Labor government governs us. And that is a huge power that's never existed in our country before, because we've never voted on the basis of religion, ever. But we're beginning to adopt that. So we're in very dangerous territory right now, and no one seems to...
The merger of church and state.
Sorry?
The merger of church and state.
Yes. And this is wrong. I mean...
the democracy believes in the segregation of church and state.
It absolutely does. Whereas Islam, it bridges everything. All those nations I spoke of earlier on that are part of that Islamic empire, whatever you like to call it, the states are individual, but the overarching is the religion. And the religion largely dominates what normal people would consider to be a democracy. And Iran is a classic case. When you look at the Iran under the Shah, it might not have been the most perfect place in the world, but it flourished. And now you're seeing people from Iran escaping and just saying the place is not a place where democracy exists or where ordinary people want to live. And so, unfortunately, this religion is dominating politics. It's dangerous.
And also what I think Tony Seabrook ran large-scale citizenship ceremonies of giving a large number of people who are due typical processes. Every local council will do citizenship ceremonies on a regular basis. But before election, he ran a large-scale citizenship ceremony, which essentially new voters coming to the fray, which in a way, how do you see that very, very kind of activity just before election, you are giving large number of people citizenship. In a typical process, they would have taken time.
The Labor Party's a very well-oiled machine. They really are. They know exactly what they're doing. They know how to get people into the country and how to get them to vote for the left. And I don't know how much of an understanding a lot of the people that have become Australian citizens actually have of how our political system works. But one of the things I would say, and if I can compare Australia as an orchard, the generations that I'm a part of and the ones before planted this orchard. We created this orchard. The orchard is bearing fruit. And too many of these immigration or people that come in through immigration are now residing in the orchard and they're picking the fruit. They're having a great time, but they didn't generate or create what's there. They're benefiting from a society that has developed the capacity to be very kind to the people that live in it. And when I see the trouble that certain politicians have got into by saying we need to curb immigration into our country, and this is an Indian thing that happened a little while ago, the reasoning behind that is that we ought not to import more people into our nation than we can turn into Australians. And I don't care what religion or what colour anybody is. If they want to be an Australian, if they really want to be Australian, come aboard, my friend. Welcome to our nation. We are a nation of immigrants. If you want to be Australian, I'd love you to come here. But if you're espousing things that say that you don't want to be Australian, you don't like what we stand for, you just don't like our political system, then you're in the wrong place. You ought not to be here.
And the migration is... The equation of migration is a bit more varied. One is, one chunk of migration is that people who are skilled migrants. So they come in, and that's probably one part of the share. And then one is refugee migration, and then one is student migration. So the student migration equation is run by the universities, and then the government supports the flourishing of universities through supporting them that easy pathways to student migration. Whereas people who are coming through skilled migration model will come and they already have the skills what Australia needs. And the question is, what skills you're wanting for. So that's done by public service, that what do you need? But that skilled migration piece is probably people who come in, would pay tax soon enough. Whereas the other two, one is a bit more humanitarian. So refugees more humanitarian grounds. We take targets, and on the student side, we're supporting universities to be financially viable, which is not the responsibility of the government.
I have a very sanguine view about universities. They are basically very much of the left, and they are continuing to turn out graduates who enter the workforce with very firm beliefs about the left, the politics of the left. Look, we desperately need mechanics, chippies, electricians, truck drivers, trades. We need those sorts of people. I would welcome them coming in here. But when you talk about refugee migration, what determines whether that refugee from Palestine or wherever they've come from will ever become an Australian? And if you see a virtue in bringing in 1,000, 5, 10, 20,000, why not bring 300,000 of them? Every one of them has a case. Their country is busted. And if you feel so soft-hearted that you want to help these people, then there's no limit to the number you should bring in. But most of all, we have a sovereign responsibility to every Australian to not see our culture destroyed. And if we can absorb people that come here, and I was in the army during the Vietnam War, and I had some views about that at that time. I was concerned about the boat people that were coming down here from Vietnam. What a wonderful addition to our economy and our culture the Vietnamese have been. So back then, I needed to learn some things that I've learned since then, that a certain amount of immigration can be a great thing for our economy and for our culture. But they didn't come here hating Australia. They didn't come here hating the values that we have. They didn't come here hating our religions and our political system. They came here because they wanted to become part of the fabric of Australia. And too many of the people, and you see this in the mosques and the imams up preaching their hate speech and what they see as the future, this is not Australian. And if I had the power, if I saw an imam preaching some of the stuff I have actually seen on video, I would march straight in there and say, you, on a plane, go away. We don't want you here influencing people, because there are a lot of Islamic people here that bring enormous value to our society. But if you've got this corrosive group of people sowing the seeds of what happened in Bondi in the minds of just a tiny proportion of the population, this is not going to come, it will not be a happy ending. And Bondi is a classic case of it not being a happy ending. You know, this is not Australian, and we should have the courage to stand up and say, you don't want to be here, we're happy to see you go home. We'll even pay for the airfare, go home.
Do you think that kind of political will, in terms of understanding and deeper understanding of the radical elements across the society by the government and by the security agencies, and then taking action fairly quickly? And before, why do we have to wait for something bad has to occur? Why can't we stop it early?
Dev, I don't know how to completely answer that. But look, in the lead up to World War II, we were so unprepared. Our nation was unprepared. Great Britain was unprepared for the bleeding obvious. What was happening in Germany and what was happening in Japan, it was recorded, and there were people that were standing up and saying, this is about to turn bad. This really is. Winston Churchill, for years and years, said England needs to rearm. It needs to be prepared to protect itself. We got away with that by the skin of our teeth. We only just got away. Now, with the invasion of the Philippines and down into Guadalcanal by the Japanese, there was a force of American ships coming to try and stop the hordes of Japanese heading south, and this resulted in a huge number of American troops being disembarked in Queensland. It resulted in the Battle of the Coral Sea. But the Japanese were coming our way. There was no shadow of doubt whatsoever. The invasion forces were heading around New Guinea to take Port Moresby because they couldn't take it on the Kokoda. They were coming. And we just got lucky that the Americans were there. And in Great Britain, with what the Germans tried to do, which was invade Great Britain, there were just a small band of Spitfire pilots, Hurricane pilots, that fought in the Battle of Britain, and they saved England from invasion. And if it wasn't for that tiny band of pilots doing what they did in 1940, Great Britain would have been overrun by the Germans. We just got so lucky, and we didn't take the advice of those people that were saying what might happen. And so now we go to Enoch Powell and Pauline Hanson and others that are saying, if you don't take the right action now, this is going to get a whole lot worse. So for heaven's sake, let's do it now rather than wait until it gets a whole lot worse.
We talked about debt initially. What are the key or big economic opportunities can we see now, and then can we capture those opportunities and then create wealth for the next generation of Australians?
Everybody I talk to in mining and industry tells me it is almost impossible to do anything. We are so over-regulated, we are so hammered, we are so constrained. You know, it takes 10 years from when a prospect in a mine out in the pastoral state of West Australia is discovered to actually bring it to production if you get there, if the money stays with you, and if you get 10 years. Hell's bells, we should have a process here that says you've found a mineral that will be mined to the benefit of every Australian within 12 months. We will get everything in place. 12 months is a long time. Within 12 months, you should be able to get out there with an excavator and start digging it up. And people look at me, oh my gosh, look, World War II, with all of what it was about, everything, it didn't really start until 1940. It was over by mid-45. 5.5 years. We conducted the biggest cataclysmic war that the world has ever seen. 5 years. It takes 10 years to get a prospect out in the goldfields or whatever to mining. This is bloody madness. And in my industry, and I'm a farmer, we are in every way being constrained, constricted, ruled and regulated. And I feel like saying to government, you are meant to be my servant, not my master. And yet, in my previous role as president of the PGA, endlessly meetings with bureaucrats and parliamentarians, and we didn't ever meet with them to say, we want you to do something. No, we want you to go away. We just want you to get out of the blasted way, because everything we try and do, whether it's a port facility, a road, anything, it's like trying to run in treacle. So we could be so much more than we are. And when I look at America, and the greatness of America, it didn't happen last year, 10 years ago. The greatness of America happened in the 1800s when they were free, when they could do all the things they needed to do. That was when they sowed the seeds of the greatness of America. And when we go to World War II, and America still had that freedom, that flexibility, and they had to crank up their war effort, a fellow called Bill Knudsen met with Ford Motor Company, after the decision had been taken to build bombers. They needed bombers. And Ford agreed to make the Liberator bomber. Willow Bend was the paddock where they decided to build the B-24 American bomber. Within 3 years, they were making one bomber every hour. Every hour. And the government didn't get in there and say, mandate everything. They just said to Henry Ford, build me bombers, and got out of the way and let him do this. And Australia, I think we made 2,260 large aeroplanes in our country during World War II. We had the capacity. We built 4-engine bombers here. We built the Sabre jet fighter, designed in America. We built it here, which was the best jet fighter in the world in the day. And today we can't even make a bloody lawnmower. And yet when I say this, people sort of look at me as if to say, well, so what? I'm sorry, you can't run a service economy country and think you're going to survive. You're not. You've got to be competitive. And that now goes into the whole energy debate, that energy and prosperity go together. Cheap energy, prosperity. High cost of energy, lack of prosperity. So we now have this situation where we are mandating the amount of CO2 emissions that industry can emit. We are forcing energy prices up to some of the highest prices in the world. Our economy is not working, but it could be. We could be so vibrant, so profitable, we could be leading the world. And yet we continually put constraints in the way of people like myself who just want to get on and do things but spend far too much time scrapping.
And it's been known fact across countries in terms of data and research that economies who consume high energy per capita are the economies which are growing. So there's a direct correlation between consumption of energy per capita and an growing economy.
Look, you're so much on the money here, and what I feel like saying to all Australians, 1.4% of world's emissions, 1.4. America, China and India, 46%. There's nothing, we're like spitting in the wind. There's nothing we can do here that will make any difference. And the fact we think that the Pacific Islanders think that by coming here and demonstrating in Melbourne and Sydney about their islands being overrun by the ocean, it's not our problem. We're not causing this. If you really want to demonstrate in a place where you can make a difference, go to India, go to China and tell them to live the third world life because you're worried about the emissions that they're making. And look, I often ask people around this whole CO2 debate, because, oh my God, CO2, I mean, the world is going to cook. I mean, we can't play football out in the Oval in the afternoon because people are going to cook. Well, I'm sorry, the world hasn't increased by more than 1 degree in the last 100 years. So whether you think it's hotter out there or not, it bloody isn't. It just isn't. 1 degree is only 1 degree. But if you come back to what we might or might not do, we need to accept the fact that as a nation, we are exporting coal, 300 billion tonnes of coal a year to be burnt overseas, but we want to shut our coal-fired power stations down here. Where is the logic in that?
The hypocrisy here is we have transitioned the burning of coal from our land to somebody else's land, but still the coal is being burned.
Still being burnt.
So the atmosphere doesn't have borders.
It doesn't.
The air can go from A to B. So we share the atmosphere globally.
So look, while you're talking atmosphere, I ask people frequently, tell me about the atmosphere. What do you know about the atmosphere? I mean, we all know that CO2 is the demon gas here. So what do you know? What is the composition of atmosphere? And that's usually a blank stare. Well, it's 78% nitrogen. It's 21% oxygen. That gets to 99% of the stuff that we're walking around in and breathing, 99% of it. So then we've got all the other rare gases that are there. So then we get to CO2. CO2 is 0.038 of 1%. Less than a third of 1/10 of 1%. Some would say 0.04. But what they're saying is if it goes up by 0.1 or 0.2 of that, perhaps it goes from 0.38 to 0.4 or 0.42, my God, the polar caps are going to melt and all the polar bears are going to die. I'm sorry, but this is such a tiny fraction. And to demonise CO2, which is the gas of growth, you know, people introduce CO2 into greenhouses to try and make things grow. Other people are saying the world is greening today more than ever before, and whether this is true or not, I don't know. But the other thing I do say to people is, if you're so concerned, when you draw in a breath, you're drawing air in that is 0.038% CO2. When you breathe out, it's 4.5% CO2. So perhaps if you really want to do the world a favour, stop breathing. Just stop breathing.
That's a very, very ironical joke. Picking up from net zero, I was talking to one of the engineers who's a scientist, and my question was, do you think net zero is a mathematical fallacy, or is that an equation to be achieved? And he said that we can achieve net zero on a day, and then you have to work around. It's just you can't have permanent net zero because it's a zero-sum game. You have to add and remove and keep on playing with it because things are so much evolving and so much dynamic. So you can't have permanency of net zero. You can achieve net zero from a mathematical equation point of view for a day, and you don't see the whole cost of the value chain. For example, the windmills, nobody thinks about what it took to make a windmill. So the whole timeline, same as solar panels, same as any other power plants. So people don't see the whole value chain; they see part of the equation or the whole equation. So if you consider the whole equation, that's a bigger challenge.
And this is, people think that net zero comes free, that we can have the photovoltaics and they're free. My understanding is that depending on the size of the wind tower, the windmill you're putting up, and where it is, you're going to need somewhere between about 1,200 and 2,000 tonnes of concrete and steel underneath that tower to stop the thing from blowing over. Concrete is one of the most energy-intensive products on this earth, making of cement. So you need to put into the equation the actual cost of building the photovoltaic cells or the windmills. You also need to factor in the point here that they're not generating power all the time. There are plenty of times where there's no wind, and there are plenty of times when it's cloudy and there's no electricity being generated. So now you need standby power. And of all the forms of standby power, the most instantaneous is gas. And my understanding is that if you work through a scale of the actual the cost of generating power, brown coal is by far and away the cheapest, the absolute cheapest form of generating electricity, followed by black coal. Then you go up through the ladder. But when you get to gas, it's one of the most expensive ways of generating power. So if you go through a period of maybe a week, 10 days, where there's not much wind and not much sun, and you've got to turn the gas burners on, you have to have the cost of that capacity to generate power sitting idle the whole time that photovoltaics and windmills are actually generating enough power. But it has to be there, so when you need it, you can switch it on. So now you've got two parallel capital costs here. The capital cost of the green, friendly, non-polluting generation of power, and the other one. But you still have the capital cost of it being there. And most of all, we are going to need more transmission lines. But if a power station remains where it currently is, and this means keeping coal burning, you don't have all the cost of the transmission lines. And this is in Victoria right now, where farmers are kicking up like steam because they don't want these bloody power lines all over their property. But when it comes down to the nuclear aspect here, people say that this is vastly expensive. Well, it might be, but people are building nuclear power stations all over the world. And the German economy is running on electricity, or not completely, but largely. German economy is running on electricity generated nuclear out of France. The French have not been backward, for that quaint little country that it is. They've not been backward about putting in place the nuclear generating capacity that they need. Now, I'm not a nuclear scientist, and I don't quite understand this, but I've been on an American nuclear submarine. If that's not modular nuclear power, I don't know what the hell is, because there are nuclear submarines travelling all over the world, American and Russian and British, with modular nuclear power stations inside them. And my only understanding here is that for cooling, they have the ocean available to them all the time, so perhaps it's a cooling issue, I don't know. But it seems to me that if people are hooked on non-polluting energy, they need to discuss nuclear. Australia has huge amounts of uranium, huge amounts of gas, huge amounts of coal. We could be generating the cheapest power in the world or the cleanest power in the world. It's at our doorstep. And yet we sit back holier than thou, refusing to allow us to move in that direction.
And one more thing with nuclear power, there's a direct correlation between how your closeness to a nearest nuclear power plant and your giving out a social license to have nuclear power. So during the AUKUS deal, we'll have nuclear submarines. We'll be having submarines on our shows. So we haven't had nuclear power plants so close to us. So in a way, that's a moving nuclear power plant across our shows. So when it stands near near Fremantle, so do you think that that'll create another layer of social license to go nuclear
We've
power?
had nuclear power plants in Coburn Sound for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But people aren't told about it. But that nuclear submarine that I was invited to be on board, and I had a cup of coffee and a piece of cake with the captain, that was in Coburn Sound. So we've had these things there for a very, very long time. This is not something that's new.
How far do you think, how do you think if there's a conversation to be had federally and nationally from a point of view of identifying or reducing energy costs for average Australians? And then what kind of energy mix do you think should be discussed openly and freely?
The world has gone past the cost of nuclear power. They're building them all over the world. We ought to bite the bullet. If we are really serious about generating clean, green energy, it has to be nuclear. There's this concept of these photovoltaics or windmills. They have a fairly short lifespan, and they would be very expensive to tear apart and pack away. I think the discussion around nuclear needs to be had, and needs to be had quickly, because, look, we've got the stuff here. The world wants what we've got here, and it's absurd that we're both refusing to mine the stuff and refusing to use it. Our future lies, if people feel that they want to have clean energy, it lies in nuclear.
And have you played with AI? Have you tried using AI in some way or form? I know you're a farmer, but I think you're fairly switched on what you're doing.
Our harvester is fairly AI. It's got 3 screens in the cab. I am very good at fixing a broken shaft, a broken piece of steel, a worn-out bearing, a hydraulic hose. When this artificial intelligence, and it is a pretty clever piece of equipment, it's fantastic when it's working, but when it doesn't work, it shuts the whole system down. So I'm wary of where this might take us to. But I'm absolutely certain that in everything that's ever happened to mankind, including the invention of the motor car, there's an initial hesitancy about the adoption. Look, we'll move this along, and we'll cover the bumps in the road as we go along that way. It has enormous benefits the way future. The bit that does worry me most of all is the capacity to steal someone's identity. That is the really frightening thing, the accumulation of information about individual citizens and the way that it might be used. This is the frightening part about it. And with facial recognition and the capacity to know where everybody is all the time, it would give a government of the wrong persuasion an enormous amount of control over a population. And I think that's what we need to be wary of.
What style of government or what style of mindset from a political point of view works for the rights and freedoms of individuals?
Small government. We've allowed the growth of government and bureaucracy in our country to expand almost unchecked. And when you put a building together and fill it up with the bureaucrats, they will scheme as hard and fast as they can to guarantee their position remains intact and not under threat. And the capacity of governments and bureaucracies to steal our freedoms is never ending. And I would always say the smaller the government is, the better government we will be. And I believe in this. There's enormous scope for private enterprise in almost everything, health, education, everything. And yet governments want to be there. And so now we have this incredible transport system in Perth, buses and trains, which is run by government. And to curry favour with the punter, now you can go almost anywhere for nothing. And it's not free. I mean, some poor bastard's paying for it. So when you get on a train trip to go from Mandurah to Joondalup for $2.50, it's probably going to cost about $15 to get you from there to there. So someone has to make up the other bit. Governments ought not to be involved in the provision of services that can be provided by private enterprise. It's the wrong place for them to be, and it allows such enormous distortion. And my view on education, I mean, if there's a given amount of money that it costs to educate a child in the public sector, that amount of money should be made available to every citizen in Australia so they can make a choice as to where they send their children to be, I'd say, indoctrinated under the current system. I'd like to say educated under the private system.
What do you think about national security in terms of safeguarding the borders from a defense point of view?
Yeah, I'm glad you got there, because a few minutes ago I was thinking about exactly this. We're about to spend $365 billion, I think, on these nuclear submarines. People like toys. Governments like toys. They just like buying toys. Our nation, back in July, was down to 24 days of fuel inside the country. I think we're a bit over 30 days fuel at the moment. We talk about cyber security, we talk about submarines, we talk about missiles, we talk about defending our nation. The Chinese have demonstrated, and if the threat was from China, that they can actually circumnavigate our country.
Yeah.
And we didn't even have a ship that was capable of getting out there and following them, because our navy is so depleted. Our fuel is coming out of India and Singapore. Now, if a tanker coming down from Singapore, if a submarine surfaced alongside that tanker and said, turn around or we'll sink you, what's going to happen? The owner of that ship doesn't want to lose it, and if he knows he's going to be sunk if he continues on, he'll turn around and go back to Singapore. In 30 days, our nation would be on its knees. This is avgas, diesel and petrol. In 30 days, we would run out of whatever it takes to make our country work. I mean, you don't need to destroy our power systems. You don't need to have a amount of cyber attack on our communication systems. If you turn the fuel off, you turn our country off. And first of all, we don't have any capacity at the moment to stop the Chinese from doing that. And even if we had those nuclear submarines that we've been promised, I don't know whether that would give us the capacity to do that. But we've gone from being 90% self-sufficient in fuel 20 years ago to 10% today. And I flew over a refinery in Geelong a little while ago. It's all going rusty. It's one that died. We've got 2 functioning refineries in Australia today, and they only exist because of subsidies being paid to them by the federal government. We have thrown our sovereignty down the drain by giving up our capacity to generate the fuel we need to run our country. And tyres are another one. We don't make any tyres in our country. So if the supply of tyres and fuel were interrupted to Australia, we'd be on our knees within a month. And yet we're not talking about it. We're not talking about we're prepared to defend the front door, and the back door's wide open. And so when it comes down to sovereignty and defence of our sovereign existence, we don't have that. And people don't want to know about it, because if you discuss why these refineries shut, you run up against so much government policy about wages, about every imposition that government can think about placing on our manufacturing system. They didn't shut for any other reason than it got too damned expensive to run them here, in the same way that building houses and every other damn thing we do here has got so expensive. So you would sheet back the blame for the closure of these refineries to just government policy. And while I'm on that, how absurd is it that we supposedly have a free market here in the trade of almost everything that we trade, but not labour? Labour is a component in a manufacturing system. And when the federal government mandates what you must pay someone to work in your factory or on your property, you've got a problem. And we were confronted with this back in June, July. We employed 2 backpackers. One could speak a bit of English, the other one not a bloody word. They said they were highly skilled in the building trade. They couldn't mix a wheelbarrow full of concrete. They were totally inexperienced, and all the qualification they said they had turned out to be just self-selling. We used them to do what we could do, and in the end, boys, it's over, can't use you anymore. You're not up to the skill level that you said you were and that I need. But I was mandated to pay them $25 an hour. The government said, if you don't pay these totally inexperienced, completely green people that amount of money, then you'll pay workers' compensation insurance on top of that, then you'll pay superannuation on top of that. Quite honestly, if they were highly skilled and I could use them to do the farm work we need, not highly skilled, you don't need to be, just skilled, to do the work that we needed to be done, they'd have still been there. But when the government said that you must pay them that amount of money, that ended their employment prospects. And I'm prepared to take staff on, but I need to determine what I think they're worth to me. They need to determine whether they want to work for me for that amount of money, because it's their labour they're selling. And this is a contract between me and the people that I might employ. The government ought not to be in the middle of that, because that's what's killing so much of what we're trying to do in our country, the cost of labour. You know, it's absurd that government should intervene in that marketplace.
And what's your observation on the agrarian/farming economy? What are things in place and not in place, and what are the challenges you're seeing beyond the labour?
We've finished a harvest. We're trying to market our grain today. The prices on the table for most of the grain segregations we've got existed in 2008 and 2009. These prices today are as low as they were 15, 16, 17 years ago. If we have inflation running at about 5% in our economy, and in agriculture it's more than that, for every $1 million worth of product that we sell, I need another $50,000 each year to remain in the same place. So when I'm talking about grain selling today for $40 or $50 a tonne less than last year and sitting around the levels they were in 2008, 2009, if anyone thinks that this has got a great future, they're not reading the tea leaves. We are in a very tight place, and when the state and federal governments handed down a wage increase, it was almost 4% a few months ago. How the hell am I supposed to get that back? Every builder put up the cost of building. Everybody employing labour accommodated the fact that the wages bill has gone up and put their prices up. Cup of coffee, $6.50 this morning. Used to be $4. So as the government messes about in our economy, and the cost of doing business goes up, they will pass it on. But I'm sorry, I can't say to India or China or Japan or Korea, I've got some cost increase in the system here, so I'm putting the price of wheat up by $20 or $30 a tonne. I can't do that. And so we're riding on the back of a fairly good year this year, season-wise, and so it's disguised the fact. But what we're trying to do is finite. We can't keep doing what we're doing in the face of a government that is totally indifferent to the impact. And what I've said is that, and no one seems to want to pick up on this one, but we should have a small body of bureaucrats who analyse all legislation before it, I hate the word bureaucrats, but to analyse legislation before it enters the state or federal house and simply say, what will be the impact of this legislation on our cost of production and our exporters? And if the impact is negative, it shouldn't even go to Parliament. End of story. This is not complicated. I mean, if you're about to pass a piece of legislation, you need to carry out an impact study, financial impact study. And this should be done before it, because again and again we see these pieces of legislation float through state and federal parliaments that decrease the capacity of our nation to compete, and no one gives a damn. No one even wants to discuss it. But it just, we're dying the death of 1,000 cuts, and no one seems to know about it.
In conclusion, if you can give what a citizen should do during non-election years, because you're thinking about who the political party is, what they stand for, but what should they be thinking and worrying about during non-election years?
This is the only argument that I've ever had to win. When people say, you're banging on about all this stuff all the time and whatever, and you've got to get with it, and the economy is changing and our society is changing. Yes, but I'm fighting for the future of your children and your grandchildren, because you can see what's happening today, how they can't afford to buy a house and everything's getting harder and harder. Well, it's just going to get worse. If you want to protect the future of your children to an education and a house and a lifestyle commensurate with yours, think about the policies that are in place, because this is the fight I'm having. It's for I'll be gone. I mean, I've only got a few more years to go, and I'm financially secure enough not to worry about my future. My involvement today is about protecting the future of young Australians. And I'd say to people out in the street today, think about where you're going to place your vote. Think about the policies the government's putting in place, and ask yourself the question, does this build a more prosperous future and a safer future for your kids? Because at the moment it doesn't. What's your message also on getting involved with political parties? Because majority of the population stays out of the political party membership. Oh, Dev, this is hard. I addressed some students over in Marcus Oldham College in Geelong a few months ago, and they were on the cusp of entering a career in agriculture, mostly in agriculture. And I had to add at the very end of it, please get yourself involved in the protection of your industry and your future. You have to do this. Unfortunately, we are riding a wave of prosperity, false prosperity, generated by the infusion currently of $37.5 billion of borrowed money. This creates a sense of prosperity that doesn't actually exist. Just get tuned into what's actually happening open your eyes up to more things than what's happening in the footy on Saturday afternoon. Have a think about the economy into the future and the impact it will have on your kids. I'm not saying you should join the Liberal Party. God save us if you join the Labor Party. But be supportive of people who know how our country runs. And more than anything, we have Norway, a sovereign fund. They invested all their money from minerals and mostly oil into the future education and health. They've got this massive fund of money. Singapore's another nation. Lee Kuan Yew had some fabulous things to say about Singapore and about Australia.
Yeah.
And he was very critical of Australia. He said if you become a Singaporean citizen, you take a share in this wealth fund that we have, this massive amount of investment. As a citizen, you become a beneficiary of this amount of money. You sign yourself up as an Australian citizen, you're signing yourself up for nearly $1 trillion worth of debt, or you're sharing it. And the fact that we've allowed our country to fall itself $1 trillion in debt, what have we got for it? So much of it has been blown away on social stuff, and there's nothing to show for it. At the moment, we have ramping in our hospitals in West Australia. There's so much that isn't working here because the money's been spent in the wrong place. Take responsibility for what's happening here and tell the political parties that you're not prepared to support them if they keep going with this policy. And look, I'd always regarded Pauline Hanson as being a bit out in the fringe. I'm seeing her as being an alternative that a lot of people might turn to.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks a lot.
Dave, thanks, mate.